So the word Anunnaki really means the bloodline of An or Anu. So in the Anunnaki pantheon, because they had a pantheon of gods, the main god, or I should say the head god, because they also use a base 6 number system. So he was number 60 rank. He was Anu. He would be equivalent to the Father Sky for their sort of like esoteric beliefs. And then you had another guy called Enki, who was the first son born of Anu, but because he was born of a consort, he was not an heir to the throne. So his half-brother Enlil, who was born from Anu's half-sister, he was the crown prince for the pantheon. And this caused a rivalry between the two, because Enki, being the firstborn, always felt that the throne should be his, and Enlil, because he was born of both royal bloodline.
What if I told you that everything you know is just the beginning? Beyond the veil of the ordinary lies a realm of hidden knowledge, ancient wisdom, and untapped potential. A place where consciousness expands, reality bends, and the impossible becomes possible. You weren't meant to stay asleep. You were meant to awaken. Open your mind, remember who you truly are, and step with me beyond the frequency 369. Hey, before you start the episode, if you're on YouTube or Rumble, like, subscribe, and hit that bell. You want to make a comment? Go for it. It's America. If you catch me on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, hit me with those 5 stars. I appreciate the support. Let's start the show. Welcome back to Beyond the Frequency 369, the show where we explore the hidden threads that connect our minds, bodies, and the universe. I'm your host, Cesar Pagan, and tonight we've got a guest who's all about aligning physical strength with spiritual growth. Joining us is Todd Cave, an online personal trainer dedicated to helping spiritually inclined individuals achieve their fitness goals. Todd doesn't just focus on the body. He's about creating harmony between mind, spirit, and physical well-being. Join us as we dive into how fitness can be a pathway to higher consciousness and self-mastery. Todd, welcome to the show. I'm excited to get into this. How are you?
I'm very well, sir, and I'm very happy to be here. And yeah, thanks for having me.
Awesome, man. Awesome. Dude, so I found you through YouTube. You were on Cult of Conspiracy. And I listened to the episode, and I was driving downtown, actually, doing some errands and things like that. And I don't know how long the episode was, but man, was I intrigued. I was stuck on it. I literally was just like, because, you know, those guys are friends of mine too. And I said, let me see what's going on here. I heard about Todd Cave. I haven't listened to you in other interviews. So I said, today's probably the day. Man, that was a great episode. It was the second one that you did with them.
Yeah.
So I think probably when I went to do an errand, I parked and I texted you and I said, I gotta have you on my show, man. So that's how I got to it, man. But man, you have a lot of good stuff to say, man. So I'm excited to get into this whole conversation with you. First of all, man, how are you doing today, man? How are things this week with you?
Things are well with me. I've been busy. I'm actually on holiday. Well, it's more like a working holiday, because even though I'm at home, but because what I do, my entire business is online. I've just been doing that, but still splicing in some personal stuff and visiting family and friends and going out here and there. So I've been even busier, but it's been nice. It's been nice because I haven't traveled for a while externally out to the country. I'm very happy to be back home in Barbados. And, you know, this is pretty much where it all started. I was born here and then obviously went to the UK and then basically lived half of my life or more out there. So you know, it's very good to be back because I've not come back to Barbados for 7 years. So this time it was like, you know, completely different for me, because when I came back the last time, that was when I was going through my refinement period. And that was like pretty much almost more or less at the beginning. But yeah, so now to come back in a different frame of mind, then, you know, and also in a different place, it feels good. So I feel good. My mother's been taking care of me. Like, man, like I put on a few kilos of that.
Right?
You know what I mean? Mom's cooking, and like I brought my food scale and they do weigh, but sometimes it's like, you don't get this every day. So
Enjoy it, man. Enjoy it.
absolutely,
Enjoy while she's, physically alive and being able to.
absolutely.
I mean, I don't think you're ever too grown to be pampered by your mother,
Hell no. I think that that would be pretty much for life, And me and my mother have a really good relationship as well. So, like when they come back, she always, like my sister always says, "Oh, your prince is back." Because my sister lives here, right? I don't. So obviously, like, it's not that my mother treats me better than her or different. It's just that, when someone is away for so long, then, you really, take advantage and express like how much you miss someone and stuff like that. So it's been really, really good for me. So I'm planning to come back more regularly again, because 7 years without coming back was way too long.
And Barbados, man, I mean, that answers your accent.
Yeah, my accent is all over the place because I was born in Barbados, yes. I left Barbados as a young man, went to the UK, spent almost half of my life there. When I was working there, I used to be a civil engineer and I used to work in the tunnels as well. So I was a tunnel engineer for 5 years. So I was underground pretty much all that time. And I used to work with Irish, Scottish people and people from Newcastle who you call Geordies, and then a couple of Welsh people as well. So I picked up a bit of their twang. So I can always change it up, like if I really wanted to. So it's not too hard when you've been living in the UK for so long, I can really, really put it on, And people say, "Todd, where are you from?" Well, I was born in Ireland, but my dad's from Barbados and he was kind of a bit of a sailor. And my mum's, from Ireland. And so I can switch it up as well. So, it's just like, if I'm going back in work mode,
Yeah. Can you, and I hope this isn't like any kind of offensive way, but can you do an American accent? Have you ever tried doing that?
That is the funny thing, right? Even though we grew up with a lot of American TV, I don't seem to be able to do it very well. And the thing is that when people hear me speak, they say, "Oh, you sound very American." And I'm like, I'm baffled by it because it's very Caribbean, but still with some British twang in there mixed with the up northerners, from the UK, the Scots, the Geordies and stuff. So I don't know. So some people say that the way I speak is by default sound American, but that leaves
Yeah.
me dumbfounded.
That's wild. That's wild. No, I asked it because I've seen people like on TV shows that are from Britain and things like that, and they do American accents. I'm like, wow, like how do you just switch it up, just like just gone and everything? So I just curious to see if you could do it too, though. But it's all good, man. It sounds fine. We understand each, so everything's good, buddy. Yo, well, I'll tell you what, man. Let's dive straight into this, man, because I'm curious about what is it that you do now. Many people treat fitness and spirituality as two separate journeys. So what's your approach to merging the two?
So my ethos, the way I think and the way I run my entire sort of business and coaching is that I go through the body. But what happened to me is that I was always an athlete and I was always into fitness. But after I had my surgery in 2017, that is when I started my refinement period. So I call it my refinement period instead of the dark night. The refinement period, as it says with the word period, is a while, right? And the reason why I use the word refinement is that when you mine gold, it comes out and you put it all together with the ore and it's in like in a doré bar, and that goes off to the refinery, and then they heat it. So when they heat it, they're refining it, so you get 14 karat. When you heat it some more, 18, 22, 24, and then after that you get monatomic gold. So the reason why I use the word refinement is because when I look back at where I was and where I am now, the amount of refinement that I've had to go through in order to be able to coach people, to be able to help them through their challenges, to recommend what books to read, what meditations to give them and stuff like that, is because I was there. And because my refinement period was so hard and so long, I basically got the PhD in it because of time served, right? And what I learned through my journey is that if it were not for being physically active through it all the time, I would have gone mad. I would probably be in a madhouse now on psychoactive drugs and all that kind of stuff. So because my journey was through fitness in a way, I became a coach, and I didn't want to become a coach. Basically, I had a conversation with my higher self at night, and the voice, as I always call it, came in, and the voice spoke to me, and the voice told me that I'm going to do coaching, and I refused. And basically, my higher self, we had a big long argument for like 2.5 hours, and then it just gave in, and I never looked back. And that's the reason why, like, a lot of my awakening came because fitness and the routine and the discipline and the consistency and the mindset all are what helped me through. So basically, when I coach people based on my life journey, which is through the body, eat the right food, get into shape, and stuff like that. Then what happened is I started to read books like from Joe Dispenza. And then I started to understand really the inner workings of the subconscious mind and stuff like that. And then obviously I had influences from other things in terms of psychedelics. And then when you start to study Nikola Tesla and his work, there's one quote that remained very, very in my subconscious, that when humanity starts to think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration, they will unlock the keys to the universe. And I put at the end, unlock the keys to themselves. So what happened is I started to think of everything in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. So that meant then that exercise is a high vibrational activity. Having proper nutrition is high vibrational because the food you're eating has higher levels of energy, right? So processed food is basically dead food. So when it started, because I was a civil engineer as well, my brain works a little bit differently from most people, because I think in systems and structures and looking at the blueprint, get into the root cause. And when I started to study food and nutrition and the medical industry and the pharmaceutical industry and just food in general, I realized that the food that they were giving us was terrible. So I started to clean my own diet up, my own nutrition. So then I started to realize, okay, so there is a spiritual aspect to this, because scripture talks about the body is the temple. So if the body is the temple, it means you have to respect that temple. And what do you do to the temple? You feed it good food. Because then I started to look at, the relationship that people have with animals, especially pets. And people give their pets the best food, at least a lot of people. So I said, okay, if we give our pets fantastic food, why don't we give ourselves fantastic food as well? So it kind of like clicked to me, and I was like, okay, so the exercise part cleans up the body, the food complements that. And then what happened to me is that as my body started to become cleaner, I started to realize the spirit inside of me. Now that was helped through a lot of books that I read and having psychedelic experiences. But before I had the psychedelic experiences, I started to realize that the spirit becomes a lot more recognized, because the spirit is always there, but it's just a matter of if you recognize it or not. So then now I started to, do a lot of like work on myself, and in terms of like, I saw how my body felt when I would eat processed food or high levels of sugar. And I started to realize, okay, well, I can clearly feel a difference in my body and in my actual performance in training. So I said, okay, you know what? I'm going to explore this and lean into it. And then when I decided that I was going to become a coach, it kind of like all fell in together. And it wasn't even really my plan. It just kind of like unfolded bit by bit. And I remember I had a coach, and she was telling me, but Todd, I know that we've been trained to just talk about fitness and stuff like that. But she said, like, why don't you think about talking about other things? And I said, what do you mean? She says, well, what do you like? I said, well, I like books. I like traveling. I like to talk about things like consciousness and spirituality, extraterrestrials and stuff like that. And then I like pretty girls. She says, well, why don't you talk about all those things? I said, but we're coaches. Like, we're just supposed to focus on fitness. And she says, no, like, social media has the word social in front of it. So you have to be somewhat social. So I was like, okay, fair enough. And I started to just come out of my shell and start to write about these things, because if anyone goes to my actual Instagram, I've been writing about stuff like this since 2022, you know, and I've been talking about these things since 2021, actually. Yeah, 2021 is when I was writing about these things, because I used to write long posts, you know, and it just like developed as more books I read, and then, you know, it just felt so natural to me, because I found that just talking about fitness was just very one-dimensional. And I find that people may want to get into shape, but unless there's like something else that connects them to it, because there's some people that just generally don't like exercise, so you would never really get through to those people. But those people may be interested in, okay, maybe learning a little bit more about myself, learning about my self-sabotage traits, learning a little bit more spirituality and consciousness. So what you're able to do then is that you're able to connect to those people and say, look, these things are important, but what's inhibiting you from excelling or getting at a higher level is because you're in not very good shape and your nutrition is not very good. Because nutrition very much dictates how we are, who we are, and what we become, because it's all energetic. Because if you're eating poor quality food, you're going to most likely be out of shape. When you're out of shape, you're going to feel really badly about yourself. When you start to feel badly about yourself, those feelings are going to feed your thoughts, and then you're going to produce more negative thoughts. And then those negative thoughts are going to go back into the body, and then they're going to confirm with the feeling and create a feedback loop of thoughts and feelings, thoughts and feelings. So that's when you started to realize, okay, the food actually changes your mood, right? And obviously you need to have better quality food to get into shape. So because I'm a civil engineer, I was like, well, this just made sense. So the mind, body, spirit, the mind, body, spirit complex, which is what I talk about all the time. So for me, when I'm coaching or I am talking to people about getting into shape, I have to talk about the other parts in terms of mindset, because getting into shape is actually very easy. But the hard part is actually having the consistency and the discipline which comes from the mindset. So I tell people, this is why I work a lot on mindset and belief systems and stuff for my clients. So you can, if you want to get into shape, it means that you've been consistently doing the right things and you're not relying on feelings, because motivation is just a fleeting emotion and it comes and goes. So what you have to do is you rely on habits. Habits come from your mindset. So even if you don't feel like getting up to go to the gym, you get up and go to the gym anyway, and you do it. Even if you don't train at 100% and you train at 75%, well, make sure that if you can only give 75% physically that day, your 75% is your 100%, right? Because you may be a little bit tired. So you give the limit that you can, and you say, okay, well, the body was a bit weaker today, but that was the maximum that I had at that time. So it's still your 100%, which comes from your mindset. Then the mindset is also, well, you know what? I'm going to put the time in my diary to go and do my food shopping and also my meal prep. So, and I'm going to make a day to do the meal prep. So when I make the day to do the meal prep, that comes from your mindset. That comes from you ignoring, hey, Todd, you want to come to the bar with us today? Nah, mate, I have some stuff to do. I'm going to cook my own food. They say, yeah, but you changed, Todd, man. You don't want to come and drink with us anymore. Well, actually, yes, I have changed, right? And because now you seeing the changes in yourself, then you're able to have confidence. Well, no, those things I'm not going to do to the degree that I did before. Every now and then a drink is fine, right? But not every day, not every weekend, right? That discipline comes from the mindset. When the mind and the body get married, then you start to realize the spirit inside of you, because the spirit is like expressing itself now, because the body is cleaner, is less toxic, is vibrating higher. And then you start to realize the spirit. You start to get the intuition. You start to get maybe the voice talking to you. You start to maybe like get more in tune with like your connectiveness to the planet, to the animals, to the plants, and all that kind of stuff. You're not going to get that if you're in a low state of vibration, your diet is bad, and the body is not moving. So this is why I capture all the things together, because for me, it just makes sense that you can't separate consciousness from fitness, and you can't separate fitness from spirituality, because the fitness part will get you to a point, but then the reason why it will get to a point is that it's easy to become very vain after you get into really good shape. So because when you get into really good shape now, if you have a high level of consciousness or you're working on yourself to get there, it means then that you would not be so egoic in your attitude, where in terms of a girl, she's posting all these butt pics on social media. And if you're a guy, you're out there walking around thinking like you're Bill Bixby, right? So, you know, this is where now they're connected, because when you start to get into really good shape, yes, people will start to look at you and get compliments, but you just be very gracious, and you don't have to go out there showing off and being in such vanity, right? Because this is what we live in now. We're living in a very vain society. And this is one of the reasons why we have so much debauchery on the planet and on social media. So this is why I link everything together, because they have a symbiotic relationship, the mind, the body, and the spirit. And if you weaken one, you weaken the entire complex, because that's what we are, a mind, body, spirit complex, you know?
Yeah, I love that. You know, it sounds like because before we started recording, I shared with you that when I had my awakening and how I pretty much kind of almost damn near had a mental breakdown, but I didn't really have something to help me gauge it or keep me grounded. And it sounds like you had fitness. So while you were going through your awakening, you were still getting some of that energy, some of that, you know, craziness out by just pumping iron or getting cardio and things like that. And that's a beautiful thing. And I'm hoping that people that are listening, you know, take that as an advice. You know, what are some, outside of just working out, what are some other advices, some other things that people can do while they're, to help them stay grounded while they're going through their transition?
So a few things I recommend. One of them is physically grounding. So walking barefoot on the land to help some of the negative ions to go inside of the body, right? That will help you as well. I've been doing it a lot since I've been back here. Also, just getting out in nature, because nature has this profound effect on us, because basically we are connected to the earth. We share the second dimensional earth templates with the Mother Earth, right? And those are the templates for creation. So because we share the same templates, it means that we have this connectivity and connectiveness to her. And it is a her, it's feminine. You know, this is why in Spanish you call it la tierra, in Portuguese la terra, you know. So, and then they have the word extraterrestrial, which comes from the root word terra. So it's actually our earth mother, right? So basically, when you get more into nature, you can walk, and you can actually de-stress. For those that are fortunate that live close to the beach, you don't even have to go in the water. You can just walk on the sand, or even just sit on the sand, right? Put your feet on the sand, sit down, and just ground again, and just let the waves and the energy like help de-stress you, right? Then another thing that I highly recommend is meditation. So while meditation is not an easy thing to do, what you can do is you can get guided meditations. So I give my clients a lot of guided meditations, and this allows them to learn the process of how to meditate, how to bring the energy from the earth through your chakras, how to bring the energy from the Father Sky through your chakras right down to the earth and connect it right back up to Father Sky. So that meditation I highly, highly recommend. And then obviously doing like fun sport activities, dancing. So like for me, one of the other things that I do and I'm good at as well is salsa dancing. So I dance salsa and bachata really well. And that was another thing that helped me, because man, when you're going through this process and you're like, you know, when it is all dark, you need to do these fun things to separate your mind from it, because that's the reason why Obviously, like doing physical exercise, like gym training or calisthenics or whatever, screaming does help raise your energy. But there's another thing that it does. While you are training, you are not actually thinking about the things that are stressing you. You can't actually think about the same time, because if you're doing heavy calisthenics or heavy weightlifting and you're trying to push or pull, I'm sure you're not thinking about, man, I got to pay that phone bill, or, you know what, that guy down the road, he doesn't really like me, I'm sure you're not studying those things in the moment while you're doing it. So you're getting a mental break from those things. And the more breaks you have from what is pulling you down, it means then you'll be able to overcome the suffering, because it is basically a form of self-sabotage, right? So meditation, going again into nature, like hiking, whatever, doing something like salsa dancing, or if someone like wants to learn to play the piano or learn an instrument, learn a skill that is fun. It may not necessarily have to have exercise in it, but it's fun that it gives a break from the mind, because your mind doesn't ever stop. Even when you're sleeping, your mind is still going, right? And you have to have mastery over the mind, because this is why all the ancients said that when you have mastery of the mind, then you can actually create everything that you want. You can manifest it, because it all comes from the mind. So doing things like that will be very, very helpful. And then even if, you think that maybe meditating it may be too much, you can sit down and you can just journal. You can sit down and just like journal for like 15 minutes and reflect on your day. And you'll be surprised that you will put a timer for 15 minutes and the timer will go off and you'll be like, man, I still got more to write. Right. So, and this happened to me several times, because I used to journal early in my refinement period, and I would set for 15 minutes and like I would be like shh, and I was trying to be strict on 15 minutes, because you don't want to sit down there for like a long time. It's just to give you that mental break, have a bit of summary of how you're feeling, your thoughts, what's going on during the day, etc., what you want to achieve, so it can give you that sort of like, like, okay, this is where I am now, and you can have a bit of reflection, because humans are, quotation marks, so busy that they don't even have the time to do any self-reflection. And that is one of the reasons why the world is in the way it is. This is why we're living in tyranny, because most people are sleeping, because they're too preoccupied with the bills and going to work. And obviously taking care of family is important, but you have to have a balance. So if you're only giving, and you're not putting back inside of you, it means eventually you are going to be running on fumes. And after a while, then the fumes run out, and then what do? You just drop down and collapse, and no one wants that. And that's when you're forced to make changes. That happens when people get so sick that they have to then be forced to go and study nutrition and exercise and try to find the spirit inside of them and all that kind of stuff. And I tell people, do the hard thing when it's easy to do, instead of doing the hard thing when it's hard to do. Because there's going to come a time where like physical conditions are going to be hard, and you're not going to want to be listening to anyone say, oh, well, read this book, Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself, or do this guided meditation. You're going to like, bro, man, you know what I mean? We got food shortages, man. We ain't got no electricity. You know what I mean? We ain't got no water. Because those days are coming, right? I don't want them to come, but when you look at the way the system is breaking, those things are an eventuality. So you do the hard things now, get into shape. This is why I always tell people, you want to improve your life, get into shape. And then let someone like me show you how to do it in terms of bringing in all those other things as well, because you definitely need guidance on it,
Yeah, I appreciate that, Todd, because it definitely does spell out the importance of, well, you mentioned meditation, and a lot of folks like you said, a lot of folks feel like they don't have time for meditation because they're so busy. Folks, meditation doesn't mean you have to sit in the lotus position and, om and whatnot. Meditation basically just means that you have to be present. So you could be meditating while washing dishes. You could be cutting the yard. You could be painting. As long as you're present in the moment, you're meditating, So again, take some of the advice there that Todd had provided here, which is some really good stuff. But while you're in the transitioning period where you're awakening and no one's listening to you and people are calling you crazy, take a moment, go do something creative, something beneficial for yourself to ground yourself. Or like Todd said, grounding simply just means, take off your shoes, put your feet on the ground, go to the beach, go stand in the yard, but get yourself right there. Todd, I wanted to ask you, so that way folks can also understand where you get a lot of your spirituality and your information and your current knowledge. What kind of information were you getting into that you were reading, that you were absorbing as in the last however many years that you were awakening? What are some of the first literature, if you will, or videos or whatever the case is that got you going?
So the first book that I read that really put me like on this path was a book by Zachariah Sitchin called The Lost Book of Enki. And I like that book a lot because in the summary part of the book, at the end of every chapter, there's a bit of a summary. And he shows the sort of like the similar stories that are in the Bible. And when I started to look at these stories in the Bible and then look at the stories that are coming out of these Sumerian tablets, I was kind of astonished where it is very clear that the Bible has borrowed some of these stories. So it means that the Bible is not a religious book, but is a historical book with some spiritual elements injected in it, right? And then another book that I read was the Nag Hammadi. So when you read the Nag Hammadi and then you're talking about the apocalypse of Adam and you're looking at the rulers of the world, these are all books in the Nag Hammadi. You're reading about Pistis Sophia, you're reading about Yaldabaoth, then you come across the Gospel of Thomas, then you have the Apocalypse of Barnabas, all these books in there. And I was like, okay, so what I liked about, so the Sumerian tablets and the Nag Hammadi complement each other really well, because when you combine the Bible with those books, you start to see that the Sumerian tablets is more like the rudimentary historical stuff. The Nag Hammadi enlightens more on the stories in the Bible from a spiritual point of view. So you start to understand the spiritual nature of how the world works. Because the Gnostics describe how the universe was formed is that they say that the universe was both formed and unformed at the same time. So it was form and void. That's how they call it. And then they say that Prime Creator created the universe so that the universe could create him. Because if there was nothing in the beginning, it means that he was everything and nothing at the same time. So I use the word he, but he is really he and she because it's energy. So it was both the negative and the positive energy coexisting at the same time. And what Prime Creator did is that he created the universe so the universe could create him by confirming his existence, right? So this is how they break it down. So then I started to realize, okay, so there's a bit of a duality system here, right? So this is why it says, as above, so below, or from the inside to the out, man, woman, hot, cold, left, right, up, down. We all have a lot of dualities here in the world. So the Nag Hammadi really started to enlighten me on some of the spiritual elements that are not really found in the Bible and some of the hidden stories as well, and books that just were taken out. Then you have a book like the Book of Enoch. And the Book of Enoch is a very interesting book, only found in the Ethiopian Bible. And basically, this talks about how the quotation marks watchers basically ended up, what they call the fall wasn't necessarily the fall like the Bible explains it. The fall just means that they came from a higher level. In the Sumerian tablets, it talks about they fell from the moon and they fell from Mars and then they fell from another planet called Nibiru. When they say fell, just came because they were at a higher level, so they came down. Because in the Sumerian king's list, it says, and the kingship was lowered from heaven, and heaven just really means the sky. Now, English speakers, we have a very big challenge to understand the difference because we have two words, heaven and sky. But in Spanish and Portuguese, you have cielo in Spanish and céu for sky, and sky and heaven, cielo and céu, heaven and sky. So those speakers actually don't have as much of a difficulty as native English speakers, right? Because for us, the sky is like, okay, there was the clouds there, and then heaven is beyond that. So it's like this etherical, mythical place that, quotation marks, God sits on the throne on high with a long beard and a staff, and he's just ruling with vengeance. This is the problem with the English language. So another book that was a series of books that really like blew my mind was And the Word from Saint Germain in turn the Magic Presence, Unveiled Mysteries, the I Am Discourse, and then the Ascended Master's Handbook. That was a very beautiful set of books that I read. Then other books like the Enuma Elish, the Atrahasis, and one of my favorite books was the Kabbalion. Very, very good book as well. So this is where you learn as above, so below. You learn the 7 Hermetic principles. Then another book that was really, really good was the Bhagavad Gita. And the biggest takeaway from the Bhagavad Gita for me was what Krishna told Arjuna. He said that the cause of all human suffering is attachments. So I just said a few of the books that I read because a lot of my thought process, understanding of things come from a lot of different sources, and I've just amalgamated them. And a book that I encourage everyone to read, if people really want to see what true human potential really is, there's a very, very long book called The Life and Teaching of the Masters of the Far East. And this is a book that scientists from the United States, the West, they went to the Far East, in the Himalayas, in Tibet and China and India and stuff. And they were studying these masters for 30 years. So between 1890 to 1920, and they were documenting what they saw. And these were masters that were hundreds of years old, looked no more than 40, and basically teleporting and coming in and out and healing people just like Yeshua did. So it really made me think like, wow, we were just playing on a very, very low level here and not really realizing our divinity. And then obviously, like, I've done a lot of psychedelics. So I've done bufo, ayahuasca, alvarius, ayahuasca, peyote, magic mushrooms. I've done some LSD as well. And I just met a really good contact. I'm going to do Shanga very soon. So
Wow.
yeah, that's going to be very interesting. Also, some of my learnings have come from the medicine because they've shown me certain things about me, my life, who I am, what I am, and where I come from. So I incorporate a lot of those different things into how I speak, how I behave, how I do things, how I coach my clients, you know. So it's a very, very vast source of different influences, information. I've also had coaches and mentors and spiritual guides that have kind of like, you know, grounded me in certain things. So many, many, many different influences, as you can see.
Yeah. What a beautiful thing. I mean, the wealth of knowledge that you've gained on your own. Yes, you had mentors, people that you talked to, but you were interested to go outside of the norm of what's been handed to you and say, this is what you're going to follow. And look how much more information that's available to everybody that's out there that you have made the choice to look into yourself and then discern how that resonates with you. Some things I'm pretty sure you just left them be, while other things you're like, okay, I can dig that. I can vibe with that. And this is this conversation that we're trying to have in all of these podcasts and all of these, in this whole esoteric situation, is that we just want to have the conversation to, if people aren't going to look for the information, then people like yourself, people like myself, other folks, other guests, other podcasters that talk about this stuff, we just want to share that information. We'll do the work. But, you know, all you have to do is to be open, to just listen, to just hear. You don't have to accept everything. You don't have to believe everything that you're being told. No one's trying to convince you of anything. We're just telling you this information is very old. This information is available to you. Check it out. You know? So that's something that I think is very important. And this is also one reason why I do, what you do, and we all do it in our own, in all different ways to contribute to the cause, or what some will call the great work. You mentioned in some of the things that you read, you mentioned the Hermetic principles, right? And I believe correct me if I'm wrong, the first one I believe is all is mind, all and is mental, something like that.
Yes, the all is mind and the universe is mental. I actually have a shirt from my merch store with that.
Yeah.
The all is
Plug,
mind and universe is mental. Yeah.
plug it in. Plug in your merch website and everything. Tell people about it real quick, and I'll put it on the description as well.
Thanks for that. So basically, it's on Amazon. The store is called Todd and Me, and you can find Conscious Man 7 gear there, and Todd and Me clothing, and one of the tank tops is the all is mine and the universe is mental quote. Yeah, that book, the Kabbalion, really, like I said, I read that like 3 times. It was a fantastic book.
How big is it? Is it like pretty thick?
It's reasonably thick. Reasonably thick. It took you about maybe like 6 hours to finish.
Ooh.
6, 7 hours.
Get a gauge for people, like how many books do you think that you read a year on average?
I was doing about 24 a year.
Okay, so that means
Between 20 and 24. So this year I have read about, I think, 3 books this year. And I'm currently reading one, but because I'm on holiday, I kind of like stopped. But the book I'm reading now is the what's it called now? The Technocratic State or something like that by Igor Brzezinski. Because I read all sorts of different type of books, you know. But
yeah. Don't just read one lane, one source, right? You gotta spread it out. See what everyone's talking about. No, I love all of that, and I'm wondering, when we first start in this awakening journey, we're over there, we're looking everywhere that we can find some information, something. I compare it like if let's say your foundation is a boat and you're on the boat. Let's say your foundation is just the Christianity. That's it. That's all that there's your foundation. When people start poking at your belief system, you start, that boat starts to sink. And then you're like, well, where do I go? Like if what I know is not all the truth. I'm not saying it's not real, but I'm saying it's not all the complete truth and everything. Then where do I go? People start panicking and losing their mind and everything. They start digging and looking and talking to everybody that will help fill in those holes, fill in those gaps. Do you feel that at this point, because you say you've been looking into this stuff for like years now, do you feel like you've had enough? Like you've done enough research where you've slowed down, where you're comfortable, you're kind of like coasting it, or are you still as thirsty as you were when you first started?
I am still as thirsty because the more I learn, the more I realize I don't know. And because like so much stuff is coming out now, it is very, very important for me to keep learning because honestly, I don't even think I know that much, I feel like an absolute student, just like the person literally now starting. I feel literally just like them, right? I may have a little bit more experience, but I'm still a child just like them. I'm still creeping because when we become true masters, this is when we actually can heal people. This is when we can read thoughts. This is when we can teleport. This is when we can actually instantly manifest. And this is the power that the ancients had, right? So this is why I feel personally, I'm still a student and still a baby and still a child, just like all of these guys out there now listening that are listening to us. I feel just like them. So I'm thirsty still, hungry for it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I am really into the whole Anunnaki story. And I've said my version from what I understand, from what I know. I always like to hear other people talk about that as well to see if it sounds similar to, to what I know, or maybe there's something else that I don't know that there's still to learn. So just for shits and giggles, can you tell us a little bit about your understanding of the Anunnaki story? Give me your best summary. Hit me with some of the characters. What is the deal with the Anunnaki?
Okay, so high level, basically, they were a group of extraterrestrial beings that came from another planet, and it appears that that planet is what is referred to as Planet X, Planet 9, or any tablets is called Nibiru. And they came here looking to mine resources because basically the story is that their planet was going through some hard times, challenges. The atmosphere was imploding and they wanted to mine for gold as well as other things. So when they came here, they started to do mining and made here as like a base. But over many thousands of years of just doing it, the people that came from their planet to do the work, which they're called the Agigi or the Ajiji, they got fed up and they basically went to the Anunnaki and said, look, man, we didn't come here to be slaves. And we're working too hard, and y'all better get some replacements. And they burnt their tools and they downed their tools, and they were going to go to war with the Anunnaki. So the word Anunnaki really means the bloodline of An or Anu. So in the Anunnaki pantheon, because they had a pantheon of gods, the main god, or I should say the head god, because they also use a base 6 number system. So he was number 60 rank. He was Anu. He would be equivalent to the father sky for their sort of like esoteric beliefs. And then you had another guy called Enki, who was the first son born of Anu, but because he was born of a consort, he was not an heir to the throne. So his half brother Enlil, who was born from Anu's half sister, he was the crown prince for the pantheon. And this rivalry between the two, well, actually, the legend refers that caused a rivalry between the two, because Enki, being the firstborn, always felt that the throne should be his, and Enlil, because he was born of both royal bloodline, he, according to their rules, he would have been the crown prince. He would have been the one that would ascend to the throne. So that relationship caused a lot of strain between two of them. And basically, when they came to Earth here, Enki was given the Earth. He was called Lord of the Earth. So this is where his name came from, because he had other names like Nudamud and Ea, and En meaning Lord, and Ki comes from the word Ki for Earth. So this is where the word Enki came from. So he was basically the ruler of the Earth, because Enlil was over him, because Enlil was a base 50 number, and Enki was a base 40. Enlil, he was Lord of Command. So you had like how you have like in a cartel, you have a boss and an underboss. So, and he was a boss, but he was the underboss because Enlil was the boss, the main boss. So he still had to like, not that he had to get things confirmed from him, but he still had to go through him to a certain way. So what happened is that those two characters basically ended up having factions under them. So what happened is, after the Ajiji rebelled, then Enki came up with an idea that he was going to create a workforce, and they're going to use the existing hominid species on Earth. This could have been maybe Homo erectus or the Neanderthals. We don't know, but it was a prehistoric cousin of ours. And after several experiments, they finally got one to work, and that was the birth of Homo sapien sapien. And that was our sort of like direct first cousins, and they were called the Adama or the Adamu or the Adapa. So the story in the Bible where it talks about Adam is actually the creation of a race of people. It was not just one man. So Adam represents the race of Adam, the Adamu, the Adapa that was created by the Anunnaki. So what happened then is that, the first creation was like a mule. It couldn't reproduce because the Anunnaki mixed some of their DNA with the hominid species, and Ishtar, Inanna, Isis, because those are all her names, she bore the first Adama, and she injected the zygote inside of herself, and she bore that child for 10 earth months. And that's why there's a tablet with her, or figurine with a baby in her hands, and she says, "My hands have made it," right? So basically what happened is, after then, they started to do cloning. They started to clone the Adamas. But that process was tedious. So what Enki did is that he did some more genetic modification and allowed us to procreate. And there's some stories out there to say that he basically he slept with Eve, and he taught her all of these things, because the story in the Bible of the snake and the apple was basically the giving of knowledge, but it appears that maybe he had sex with Eve and he taught her how to have sex, and then she went back to Adam, and then she said, hey, look, I know what we can do. We can procreate. And, you know what I mean? This is why it says that Adam knew Eve, and that knowing, it comes from actually having sex. And you find that in the book of Jasher. Anyway, so after they started to make the clones and stuff like that, and then because that process was taking so long, then Enki did some genetic modification, upgraded our consciousness a bit, then we started to basically flourish and procreate a lot. And we were just like full-on slaves from them. So what happened is that we were getting a very high level of consciousness, because when you see the Sumerian kings list, you see these 8 immortal kings. And from looking at it, my understanding is that these 8 immortal kings were basically the first Homo sapien rulers that they had on Earth. They were the hybrids, because they were ruling for extremely long times: 18,600, 43,200, 28,800. And then they had the flood. So there's some information that suggests that the flood was man-made. But when I say man-made, it was instigated by Enlil, or it was just a natural cosmological event, and they just hid it from humans. But anyway, we were getting too smart, and this is where the whole story, the Tower of Babel and stuff, comes from, where after, you know, basically mankind was destroyed, then they came down and they mixed the languages. They say that no longer should man speak the same tongue, because we were getting too smart, and they were realizing, hey, if these guys get smarter, they're not going to need us, and we ain't going to have any more slaves. So something happened, whether they engineered it, because some information out there suggests that, and then others suggest that it was a natural phenomenon. So I sit on the fence to say that what we do know is that an event happened, and they had the flood and wiped out humanity. Then after that, they reseeded humanity. And then what they did is that they did more genetic modification with us. And this is why after the flood, you see that when the kingdom went to Kish, that the longest ruler was 1,500 years. So even when you read Genesis, you realize that there were like 2 floods, at least, maybe even 3, right? The way the book reads. And this is the way all this information reads as well, that there was more than 1 flood. So after the last flood, there seemed to have been a genetic modification done where they fused chromosome 2 and they kept our telomeres. And modern science is saying that this is not a natural change in the DNA. This was done externally, and it was done like on purpose. It was not by accident. And they know this because humans and chimps and primates share 98% of the DNA, of the same DNA. When you look at the genetic sequence, you know, humans have chromosome 2 capped and our telomeres capped. Science is saying that happened over 200,000 years ago. So let's do a little bit of math here. The Sumerian tablets document and talk about time up to 450,000 years ago. The 8 immortal kings that I spoke about, they ruled for 241,200 years. So when you do the maths, you're getting circa 210,000 years. Science is saying that the genetic modification happened about 200,000 years ago. So we're seeing some circumstantial evidence that could be very much saying that that is the case. Do we know 100%? We don't, because we were not there. But if science is saying that it happened about 200,000 years ago, and you do the math from the tablets, we're starting to see some circumstantial evidence to say that, hey, we've been tampered with. Our DNA has been tampered with.
Yeah,
so,
that's what that blows my mind, because, you know, our history says that humanity's been around for like 6,000 years.
How can it be?
Exactly. But then there's other part of humanity, which let's just call them scientists, archaeologists, whatever, that say what you said. You know, that goes much bolder. And then there's these tablets that have been found, you know, and they're in the museums in Britain, in Germany, wherever the case is. And these tablets have been dated back way, way before 6,000 years. And it looks like there's writing, and there's cultures that, you know, fortunately back when Stitchin was trying to decipher some of these cuneiforms and everything, that understood that. So if there's people that were able to read it and to teach, these folks how to read it and translate and keep pushing it forward, like, to me, the argument just stops there. Like, and then when people talk about, well, actually, I don't think people talk about it anymore as much, with the whole like Bible being the first book. Yeah, a lot of people follow just the Bible, but even if you Google what is the Bible, just a definition, it tells you it's a collection of stories. It's a collection of stories. So like, I'm sure there's about two or three other sentences after that definition. But again, it stops there for me. Okay, well, if this is a collection of stories, where are those stories? Then you go back and then you start reading a lot of those stories in these tablets. And this information is out there for anybody to look into. And then, but then people want to dismiss it intentionally because it'll shift their paradigm. It'll mess things up for them, intentionally say, you know what? They're just campfire stories. They're just, people back then were just bored. I mean, Todd, I think you and I can agree the amount of work, you and I understand the amount of effort and time that it will take to write cuneiform on these mud, clay tablets and things like that. And that is not for somebody who is bored. Bored is a stick figure on a cave wall, put a paint with your fingers, and that's it. But to like dictate a story, a record, a history of something, that's intentional, right?
Absolutely. It's painstaking to actually sit down to write out those things in cuneiform, and like the detail that is there, right? Is basically a stylus that they use as well. So, what you said is true, because what I find is that people, and I guess it goes back to what Mark Twain said, it is easier to fool people with a lie than to actually tell them that they're being fooled. I'm paraphrasing, but that's basically what he said. And it is so true, because what I find is that the human sort of like collective hive mind now is that they prefer to accept the lie because it feels comfortable, it feels safe, and it feels good. And they basically were willing to accept anything as long as they don't have to have any pain, have any difficulty, or basically turn their paradigm upside down. So they just want to feel safe. So they will literally walk away and deny what they see in front of their face or what the evidence is. And even if it's circumstantial, what it does is that it makes you think. Humans today don't want to think. This is why they just want to be entertained by short and reels on social media, because they have the attention span of a goldfish, which is what, 4 seconds? So
yeah,
yeah. So when you come to want to tell them, well, actually, there are structures on Earth that when you actually look at the star alignments, they would have had to been here up to maybe 36,000 years ago, because the way the stars are aligned, it can't be that they're 6,000 years ago. And then when you even look at the Sphinx, when you look at the base of the Sphinx, it looks like definite weathering from water. So that means that you had to have the River Nile higher at that level. And if it weren't the Nile, it means there was some sort of event that happened on Earth that had water constantly flowing, or they had a massive amount of water that was there that after a while, it disappeared. And the only event that I can think about would be the Younger Dryas, which happened 12,500 years ago.
Yeah.
So that means then that the Sphinx would have had to been built prior to the Younger Dryas. So we are talking minimum 12,500 years. I mean, some people say 12,800, 12,000. Well, it was a 1,000 between friends, right? But my point is that the Sphinx would have had to been there before then, because you're not going to build the Sphinx when you have an ice age or you have elevated levels of water that would basically hinder the actual construction of it. And it looks like if it is one solid piece of rock has actually carved out. We don't even have the technology now to do that.
Yeah. Let's talk about that. That is a great point. I've talked about the Sphinx a couple of times, but I never even put together the fact that it's one solid stone carved into this, animal figure, which in reality it was, and correct me if I'm wrong, from my research, yeah, it does have an animal body, but the head was recarved down to one of the pharaohs or something like that, right? It was recarved down, so that's why the head doesn't match the body, and then I think the tips, like the nose and things like that, were like chipped off. Can you talk can you talk a little bit more about that situation? Because it's a little fadey for me.
So it looks like if Amun-Ra is the one that caused a lot of the defacing of a lot of these statues, because when Amun-Ra came into power, he basically was the pharaoh for when Amenhotep, and then what's the other guy's name now? It'll come back to me because sometimes I have a bit of a brain freeze. But Akhenaten. So Akhenaten was the one that it looks like if he is the one that brought him monotheism. Under Amun-Ra, who was really Marduk, he was trying to do away with the system of multiple gods and the pantheon, and he wanted all worship and veneration for himself. And even in the Lost Book of Enki, Zacharias Sitchin shows that ism started from him, because it looks like all of that stuff came out of like Babylon as well too. Anyway, basically, because he wanted to sort of like erase the past from the other pharaohs and the other gods that existed, it looks like he's the one that caused all of them to go there and deface. Because there are other statues and figurines with human faces that we know are cut off, and it looks like it was cut off because to try to like erase history. So it looks like if it was around that time, and even the timelines that they say that would be is much older than that, because the simple fact that you have the pyramids aligning with Sirius and then Orion as well at other points, and then it looks like if the Sphinx was aligned to Leo. But again, if you take the cosmological clock and you reverse it, when Leo would have been in alignment to where the Sphinx is now, that's 36,000 years. So it makes you think that, okay, if Leo, because we suspect that it was a lion as well. So if a lion which is basically symbolizing Leo, for the Sphinx to be in alignment with Leo, and if it's that old, it means then that was when the Sphinx was concluded, right? To be in alignment with it. So because you wouldn't have built it when it was out of alignment. So you would have to known that it would be in alignment, and you would build it so that it's finished to be in alignment, and for whatever thousands of years that it would be still there, but it would be a record cosmologically that, hey, this was built when Leo was in this position. So that means then that we don't know how long it would have taken them to carve that out, but I'm sure it wasn't maybe one day. So whatever X amount of years it took, it means then that it was still even older, because all the preparation work and the craftsmanship to make it, right? So these are questions that a lot of people don't really ask, because it gives some uncomfortable possibilities that it destroys and rips up the history books. So it can't be the Bible. According to the Bible, the earth is 6,000 years old and humankind is 6,000 years old. It can't be, because clearly there were other beings here on earth.
Hey folks, that was the end of part 1. I'll see you in part 2.